My phone rang at 9:47 on a Tuesday night, and when I picked up there was no one there. Just background noise. Voices. A laugh I recognized instantly because I'd been falling asleep to that laugh for 4 years. And then a man's voice saying something low and close, and Nina saying something back, and then a sound I will not describe in detail, but that I understood completely and immediately, in the way your body understands things before your brain catches up. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone to my ear for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Then I set it face down on the counter next to my bowl of leftover pasta, and I sat down on the kitchen floor, and I stayed there for a while. Let me back up. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old. I'm an electrician, been doing commercial work for about 11 years, mostly industrial jobs, wiring for manufacturing plants and warehouses, and occasionally the odd big retail build-out. It's not a glamorous trade, but it's honest, and it pays well, and I'm good at it, which counts for a lot more than people give it credit for. I live in Savannah, Georgia, which if you've never been is a city that operates at about 60% the speed of everywhere else and is proud of it. Spanish moss hanging over everything, squares on every block downtown, the kind of heat in August that sits on your chest like a dog. Nina and I met at a wedding in 2019. She was the maid of honor. I was a groomsman I barely knew, a co-worker's wedding, the kind you go to mostly out of obligation and end up actually having a good time at. She was wearing a navy dress and had her hair pinned up, and she was arguing with the caterer about something involving the wrong appetizers with a level of calm, organized intensity that I found immediately attractive. We ended up at the same table during the reception and talked for 3 hours, and she gave me her number written on a cocktail napkin because her phone was dead, which is the most 2019 way to meet someone I can imagine. We dated for a year and a half, got engaged at Fort Pulaski on a cold January morning in 2021. I know, a fort is a weird place to propose, but Nina had been wanting to go, and we'd kept putting it off, and eventually, I just bought the ring and decided that wherever we ended up that day was where it was going to happen. And we got married in the fall of 2021 in a small ceremony at a venue on Whitaker Street with maybe 60 people and a jazz trio and more good food than anyone could reasonably eat. The house we bought is a 3-bedroom Craftsman in the Ardsley Park neighborhood, the kind of place that needs constant maintenance which I can mostly handle myself. Creaky floors, a front porch with 2 chairs, a backyard that's just big enough for a grill, and a small garden that Nina started during COVID and kept up long after. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, had a territory that covered most of coastal Georgia and part of South Carolina, which meant she drove a lot and kept irregular hours and sometimes had dinner meetings with doctors or reps from other companies. Normal stuff for that industry. I knew the job when I married her. I should tell you my flaw now, because I believe in getting it on the table. I drink too much on weekends. Not during the week, not at work, nothing like that, but Friday and Saturday nights I'd put away more beer than I should, and when I drank I got quiet and internal and hard to reach. Nina had said something about it twice in 4 years, gently both times, and both times I'd nodded and acknowledged it, and then mostly not changed. It wasn't destroying anything. It was just a thing that sat between us, small and patient. I mention it because she brought it up later, as a reason, and I want to be honest that she wasn't entirely wrong. We were not a perfect couple. We were a real one. We argued about money sometimes, about whose turn it was to call the plumber, about whether to have kids and when. We had stretches where we felt close and stretches where we felt like friendly roommates who shared a mortgage. Normal stuff, I thought. The texture of a real marriage. The first thing I noticed was in March. Nina had a work conference in Charleston, 3 days, which was normal. She did 2 or 3 of those a year. She came back on a Thursday night, and she was different. Not dramatically, not in a way I could have pointed to and named. Just slightly elevated. Lighter. The way someone is when they've been somewhere fun and they're still carrying a little of it. I thought nothing of it. Conference, good hotel, open bar at the networking dinner. That tracks. But then the following week, she started going to the gym in the evenings. Tuesday and Thursday nights, 7 to 9. She'd been talking about getting back into a routine for months, so again, nothing alarming. Except she'd been at the same gym, the LA Fitness on Abercorn, since before we got married, and she'd always gone in the mornings before. The schedule change was small. I filed it under people change their routines. In April, I noticed she'd changed her phone password. She'd had the same 4-digit code for years. I knew it. She knew I knew it. It was never a thing. I don't even know exactly when she changed it. I just reached for her phone one evening to check something on her calendar because my hands were covered in grease and she was in the other room, and the old code didn't work. I tried it twice, thought I was misremembering, put the phone down. I didn't ask about it. I told myself I was misremembering. Then there was a name. Patrick. He came up in maybe April or May, mentioned as a regional sales rep for one of her company's partner organizations. She'd run into him at the Charleston conference. Apparently, they'd gotten stuck at the same table at a boring industry panel and bonded over how tedious it was. She mentioned him twice, maybe 3 times, in passing. Patrick thought the new district quotas were unrealistic. Patrick had a funny story about a meeting with a hospital administrator who kept mispronouncing everything. Patrick this, Patrick that. And then, like someone had turned off a faucet, she stopped mentioning him entirely. I want to be very clear that I am not someone who polices my wife's friendships or gets territorial about her having male colleagues. I have never been that guy and I'm proud of it. But there's a difference between a name that fades naturally and a name that gets deliberately retired. This one felt like the second kind. I didn't say anything. I kept telling myself I was reading too much into nothing. By June, I had stopped being able to fully convince myself. The Tuesday and Thursday gym nights were still happening, regular as clockwork. She'd come home glowing and a little distracted, and when I'd ask how the workout was, she'd say fine, good, tired, and then disappear into her phone on the couch. The phone that now had a password I didn't know. I was not handling this gracefully. I want to be honest about that. I was running 2 parallel tracks in my head at all times. The track that said I was being paranoid and insecure, and the track that said something was genuinely wrong. And the effort of maintaining both tracks simultaneously was exhausting in a way I couldn't explain to anyone. I wasn't sleeping well. I was distracted at work, which for an electrician is not just uncomfortable, but actually dangerous, and my foreman pulled me aside on a Thursday afternoon and asked if everything was okay at home, and I said yes, and I could tell he didn't believe me. The mundane details of that period are what stay with me. I remember driving home from a job on Chatham Parkway one evening in late June, windows down because the AC in my truck had been acting up, country music on low, and I was just a guy driving home from work in the heat. Normal. Completely normal on the surface. And underneath it, I was doing math, calculating how many Tuesday nights there'd been since March, how many times she'd come home glowing, whether the timeline fit with something I didn't want to name. Doing that math while a Sturgill Simpson song played on the radio. The ordinary and the unbearable existing in exactly the same moment. I thought about asking her directly maybe a dozen times. I always talked myself out of it for the same reason. I had nothing concrete. Just patterns and feelings and a password I didn't know anymore. If I accused her and I was wrong, what did that do to us? What did it say about me, about the trust one supposedly had in this person? I had no proof. I just had the feeling that a thing was happening that I could not see. Some nights I'd lie awake and think about that guy Patrick and try to reconstruct him from the 3 or 4 things Nina had mentioned. Regional sales rep, was at the Charleston conference, found the panel boring, had a funny story about an administrator. A real person made of almost nothing. That's what was killing me. Not a clear enemy, but a shadow. A few anecdotes and a name that had been quietly erased. I Googled him once. Found a LinkedIn. Patrick Dorsey, 36, Senior Regional Account Manager, based in Charleston. Professional headshot. Generic bio. A real human with a job and a LinkedIn and apparently also my wife. I closed the tab and didn't open it again. So, Tuesday night in July. I'd worked late on a commercial retrofit job near the port of Savannah, got home around 7:30, tired and dirty, and Nina had already left for the gym, which I knew she would have. Tuesday night. I showered, put together some pasta from whatever was in the fridge, poured a glass of water, just water, I want to note, I was trying, and sat at the kitchen counter watching something forgettable on my laptop. My phone lit up at 9:47. Nina's name on the screen. I picked up immediately and said her name, and there was nothing. Just noise. Background sounds. For a second I thought it was just a pocket dial. The call would drop. I'd text her that she called, and she'd say sorry, didn't mean to. That's what I expected. I almost hung up. Instead I stayed on the line, not entirely sure why. And within about 10 seconds I understood why my brain had decided to stay. I will not transcribe the 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I will say that I heard her voice clearly. I heard a man's voice. I heard enough to understand completely what was happening and where she was and the nature of what was going on between them. There was a moment, maybe 2 minutes in, where I heard her laugh. Not at me, not at anything involving me, not the laugh she gave the room at a party. A small, private laugh. The kind you give someone when you are comfortable with them in a way that takes time to build. That was somehow the worst part. The laugh. At 4 minutes and 40 seconds the call dropped. I set the phone face down on the counter. I sat on the kitchen floor. I don't know how long I was down there. Long enough that my back started to ache from the hard tile. I kept waiting to feel something that made sense. Rage, tears, something loud. What came instead was a terrible quiet. Like every system in my body had just gone into some kind of standby mode. Processing. Please wait. Nina came home at 10:15. She was in a good mood. She kicked her shoes off at the door the way she always did, dropped her gym bag, said, "Hey, how was your night? You eaten?" I was sitting at the kitchen counter. Pasta mostly untouched. Phone face down where I'd left it. "Yeah," I said. "I ate." She opened the fridge. Said something about being starving. Asked if there was any of the pasta left. I watched her. "You called me," I said. She turned around. "What? Tonight?" At 9:47. "You called me." Something moved behind her eyes. Fast. Gone just as fast. My phone must have. I didn't mean to. I was at the gym. "Yeah, I was at the..." "Nina." She stopped. "You were not at the gym." The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room completely, wall to wall, no gaps. She set down what she was holding. She looked at the floor. She didn't say anything for a long time, and then she said, quietly, "How long have you known?" I didn't know until tonight. I suspected. "Daniel." "Is it Patrick Dorsey?" Her expression answered before she did. "I need you to say it," I said. "Yes." Just the one word. Like it cost her something. I nodded. I don't know what I nodded at. I stood up, picked up my keys off the counter, and walked out to the porch and sat in one of the two chairs and looked at the street and the Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees in the dark, and I sat there until almost midnight, and Nina did not come outside, and eventually I went inside and slept on the couch. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm posting this now because I think I finally have enough distance to be able to write it out without my hands shaking. Hey, I said I'd update, and here I am. First, thank you to everyone who commented on the original post. I didn't expect that kind of response, and I read through most of it over a couple of sleepless nights. A few of you said things that actually helped, and I want you to know that. Some of you said things that were just mean, and I want you to know that I understand the impulse even if it didn't help. When you post something raw like that, you get the full range of humanity in the comments, and somehow that felt appropriate. Here's where things are. Nina is still in the house, which I know sounds insane, but let me explain. This is our house. Both our names on the deed. We couldn't figure out the logistics of either of us leaving on short notice, and we're not at a point yet where the lawyers have gotten involved. So for the past 3 weeks, we have been two people living in the same 1,600 square feet while quietly dismantling a 4-year marriage. It is exactly as miserable as it sounds. We are civil. We are not warm. We talk about practical things. The utility bill, whose turn it is to get groceries, whether the leak under the sink got worse. We do not talk about anything that matters. I have been sleeping in the guest room. I moved my stuff in there the morning after it happened, and I have not slept in our bed since. The guest room has a window that faces the backyard, and I can see the garden Nina planted out there. And sometimes in the morning when the light is coming in, I look at those tomato plants and I think about how much I know about her. The way she plants things, the specific kind of stake she uses, the fact that she always overestimates how many she can manage and ends up overwhelmed in August. And I think about how that knowledge doesn't disappear just because everything else did. You don't unlearn a person. That's its own specific kind of grief. I told my brother first. His name is Kevin. He's 41. He lives out in Pooler. And he is the kind of person who processes information by going very quiet for a long time before he says anything useful. He went very quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you want me to come over? Not do you want to talk about it? Not here's my opinion. Just, do you want me to come over?" I said yes. He came over, and we sat on the porch and drank coffee and watched the neighborhood go by, and he didn't give me advice or tell me what I should do. And that was exactly right. Nina told her family. I don't know exactly what she said or how she framed it. Her mother called me once, left a voicemail. The irony of that word. That was careful and sad and didn't ask me for anything. I haven't called her back yet. I don't know what I'd say. Our mutual friends are in the usual impossible position. There are about 6 couples we're close with, and none of them signed up for this when they signed up for the dinner parties. Most have gone quiet, which I don't blame them for. Our friends Sheila and Marcus. Marcus works with me, which is its own ongoing thing. Came by separately, both of them, and both of them were kind without being weird about it, and I'm grateful for that. The complication nobody saw coming arrived in the form of Patrick Dorsey's wife. Patrick is married. I did not know this when I found out about him. I'm not sure how I missed it. The LinkedIn didn't show anything, and in the 4 months I'd been quietly dreading his existence, I'd somehow never managed to land on that detail. Her name is Brooke. She's 34. She found out about the affair the same week I did. Apparently Patrick had been sloppy in both directions, which is somehow not comforting, but is darkly funny in the way that terrible things sometimes are. Brooke reached out to me through a mutual connection about 10 days after everything exploded, very carefully, just to confirm what she already knew. We spoke on the phone for about 20 minutes. I don't know what I expected from that conversation. She was composed in the way someone is when they've been crying for days and have temporarily exhausted the capacity. She was kind. She apologized to me, which I told her she had absolutely no reason to do. At the end she said, "I just wanted to hear from someone else who was in it." And I understood that completely. I think about Brooke sometimes. I hope she's okay. She didn't ask for this either. The internal stuff is harder to write about, but I'll try. The first morning I woke up in the guest room. I lay there for a while just looking at the ceiling. It was early, around 5:30, the light was gray and thin, and I could hear the neighborhood starting up outside. A car, a dog somewhere, the distant sound of a garbage truck on the next block. Completely normal. The world insisting on continuing. I lay there, and I did the thing you're not supposed to do, which is play back the last 4 years looking for the signs I missed, and there were some. There were things I can see now that I couldn't see then, or maybe chose not to see, and I don't fully know yet how much weight to put on that. I found a tube of her lip balm in my jacket pocket about a week in. The kind she always bought, cherry-flavored, the waxy kind in the little round tin. She was always losing them and buying new ones. I stood in the hallway holding this tiny tin of lip balm, and I thought, this is the dumbest thing to fall apart over, and I fell apart over it a little. There's a road I drive to work that takes me past a restaurant on Bull Street where we had our first real argument as a married couple. Stupid thing. I don't even remember what it was about, but I remember us sitting in the parking lot afterward talking it through and eventually laughing about it. And now every time I drive past it, I have to do this quick mental preparation, like bracing for a small impact. The city is full of those now. Little ambushes. I still make 2 cups of coffee in the morning, which I catch myself doing and then feel stupid about. I've only done it 3 times, but each time it surprises me, like the hands haven't gotten the memo yet. Here's where I actually am. We've started talking about next steps. Practical ones. The house is the big question. Neither of us can easily buy the other out right now. So there are a few options on the table that I won't get into in detail because honestly I'm still figuring them out myself. I've consulted with an attorney, not to be aggressive, but just to know what I'm walking into. He was straightforward and not dramatic about it, which I needed. Nina and I had one real conversation about a week ago. Not a fight. More like 2 people sitting in wreckage and trying to take inventory. She said things about feeling lonely and disconnected for a long time, about the drinking on weekends, about feeling like she'd been trying to get through to me for a while and not knowing how. I listened. I didn't agree with all of it. I didn't disagree with all of it. I told her that having legitimate grievances in a marriage doesn't give you permission to handle them the way she did, and she said she knew that. She said it quietly and looked like she meant it, and I believed her, and that somehow didn't make any of it easier. She did not try to ask for another chance. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Some days I think I'm grateful. Some days it just feels like one more door that closed quietly. I am not drinking on weekends right now. Not as a statement, not as a grand gesture, just because I don't want to and I'm curious about what it's like not to. The first Saturday without it I didn't know what to do with my evening and ended up reorganizing my entire workshop, which my brother Kevin found hilarious when I told him about it. "You finally snapped," he said. "You're going to be fine." I don't know if he's right, but I'm choosing to act like he is, because the alternative is staying on the kitchen floor. I still love her. I think I will for a while, and I think that's just the honest and inconvenient truth of it. Loving someone and deciding you can't stay with them can apparently exist in the same space at the same time, and nobody tells you that when you're younger because it doesn't fit on a greeting card. Patrick Dorsey and his wife have apparently separated. I have no feelings about Patrick that I'm willing to examine closely right now. I'm saving that for later, maybe never. The tomatoes in the backyard are coming in. Nina's been tending them even in the middle of all this. Out there in the evenings in her old college t-shirt, the way she always has. I watched her from the kitchen window yesterday, and I thought, I'm going to miss her doing that. Whatever happens next, I'm going to miss her doing exactly that. I don't have a clean ending for this because there isn't one yet. I'm 38 years old, and I'm starting over from something I didn't see coming, and the city I live in is the same city it was before, and the moss is still on the trees, and the heat is still something you adjust to or you don't, and I am adjusting. Tomorrow, a man finds a receipt in the pocket of a coat his wife hasn't worn in 6 months, and what's written on it makes him go back through every business trip she's taken in the last 2 years.